Hello, boys and girls of all ages, and I want to welcome you to another in our series of Bible lessons about prophets of the Bible. And as we have said before, prophets are messengers of God, and God gives these people messages to give to people and to individual people, to important people, to the people of Israel, all kinds of people. And in a way, sometimes we're messengers too. Sometimes God gives the prophets the message that is not a happy message, and sometimes God gives messages that are happy messages. And so today's story, we're going to hear about a message that isn't necessarily a happy message from God that a prophet is going to give. But let us begin by talking about where we have come from and our last lesson. So today I'm going to use, for our story, I'm going to use a rather dark background. Because, as I said, our story is not a happy story necessarily, or not a happy message that God is going to give through a prophet. So in our last story, we heard about the prophet Nathan, who gave a message from God to King David. King David wanted to build a temple or a house for God because David was living in a very fancy palace. And so he wanted God to have a house that was even greater than his palace. But Nathan told him that God had said that it wasn't David who was going to build a house for God, but that it would be a son of David who would build a house for God or a temple. But God was going to build a house for David, and that house would be sons that would be king forever and ever, that David's reign as king would last forever. So let's keep that in mind, that it was going to be a son of David that was going to build the house, and that David would have children and grandchildren and so on, ancestors that would last forever. So let's keep that in mind. Well, David did have a son, and God chose the son to rule, and his name was Solomon. And he became king of Israel. All 12 tribes of Israel was under the rule of King Solomon. And King Solomon did build a very glorious temple made out of cedar wood, which is a wonderful scented wood, and large stones. And so it was King Solomon who built this temple for God. And King Solomon started out as a very wise and good king, and he followed God, and he followed and obeyed all of God's commandments. But as time went on, King Solomon started worshiping other gods, and also the God, but our God is a jealous God, and so he doesn't like it when we worship other gods, because there's only one God, and that God is the God of heaven and the God that we worship. So King Solomon also, in building the temple and building all of the walls and the city, he started to mistreat the people and treat them badly. And the people complained to King Solomon, but King Solomon didn't want to hear anything about it. So they kept having to do the labor for King Solomon. Well, there was a man whose name was Jeroboam, and King Solomon saw that he was quite the craftsman and quite the leader, and so he put Jeroboam in charge of the people in building the temple and building walls and building the city. And so the people grumbled to Jeroboam about how King Solomon was mistreating them and making them work very hard. And Jeroboam sympathized with them, and he believed what the people were saying, and he didn't like what was happening. So then we have our prophet. And our prophet's name is Ahijah. 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 And God gave Ahijah a message. And God told Ahijah, I want you to go out and I want you to buy a brand new coat. And I want you to wear that coat, and I want you to go visit Jeroboam and give him a message. So as Jeroboam was out walking along came Ahijah. And Jeroboam tells Ahijah about all the things, the bad things that King Solomon had been doing to the people. And Ahijah says, God has heard the voice of the people, and God is going to do a special thing. So Ahijah took the new coat that he had bought, that God had told him to buy, and he tore it into 11 pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And so we have 11 pieces. So he tore the garment into 11 pieces. And he took 10 of those pieces, and he gave those pieces to Jeroboam. And he saved back one piece of the garment. And he said that God was going to tear Israel apart and make two kingdoms, a northern kingdom of Israel, and Jeroboam would be king of those 10 tribes of Israel. But because God had promised to King David that he would have a son on the throne in Jerusalem and in Judah forever, that God saved back Judah, the one piece, and that would belong to King Solomon and his sons forever. So that is the message that Ahijah, the prophet Ahijah, gave to Jeroboam, that he would be king of a new kingdom, that God was going to split Israel into one piece, one tribe, and then the other 10 and 11 tribes. Other 10 tribes. And so Jeroboam became king of the north, and Solomon and his children became king of Judah in the south. So now let's talk about some questions about the story. See, I told you it was not a happy story. It was happy maybe for Jeroboam, but not necessarily happy for King Solomon. But God had to punish him because he was being bad and bullying the people. So I wonder, and as we do these wonder questions, I invite you to pause the video and to think about how you might answer each question. And remember, this is not a test. There's no right or wrong answer. So just whatever you think might be the answer is fine. So I wonder how much it cost Ahijah to buy the new coat that he tore into all of those pieces. I wonder how much that coat cost. I wonder if it was easy or hard for Ahijah to tear that coat into all of those pieces. Was it easy or was it hard? I wonder if Jeroboam ever imagined that in his life that he would become a king of a kingdom. I wonder if Jeroboam was afraid of being killed after he was told that he would be king over part of Israel, and that would make him a rival king to King Solomon and to his children. And most importantly, I wonder how God felt about having to split his children into two kingdoms. And I wonder how God felt about having to punish King Solomon, who he had loved when King Solomon had followed and obeyed God's commandments. So I think those are some pretty good wonder questions, and I wonder how you would answer those questions. So now let's talk about maybe some crafts that would go with this story. Well, as usual, I invite you, if you want to just take a piece of paper and a pencil or some crayons and to draw a picture of what you think is the best part of this story. What is the best part of the story that you liked? And draw a picture of that. If you wanted to go online, you could find a picture. I found this on the computer. It's a picture of the prophet Ahijah and his new coat getting ready to tear it, or he is tearing it, and giving it to Jeroboam. So maybe you can find this picture, or you can draw this picture and color this picture. Another thing that you can do is trace out or draw and color what looks like a coat. And then you can cut that out. And then take it and cut it into pieces, just like Elijah has done. And then take and count out the 10 pieces and put them in one place, and put the one piece in the other place. That the 10 pieces would represent the northern kingdom of Israel, and then the one piece would represent the southern kingdom of Judah. So that's another craft that you might consider. Another one would have to do with a crown. And maybe you can draw a picture of a crown or find a picture of a crown and either color it, or maybe you can find a picture of a crown already. And what I did to this crown is that it looks like it's all together, but it's actually, I punched holes and put a little clip on it. And so to represent how the kingdoms were torn in two, if you move the crown in either direction, you can see that the crown splits apart. And so now the one crown becomes two crowns. And if you look very carefully and you move the crown out of the way, you see that underneath each side is the word Judah for the kingdom of Judah, and the word Israel for the kingdom of Israel. And so that's another craft that you can consider. Another is, along the same lines of the coat, is to draw a coat and then draw it into the different pieces and then look up and find out what the different names are. And then you can color each part, or each a different color for the tribes of Israel, and then cut that apart. And then that way you know which kingdoms belong to Israel and which kingdom belongs to Judah. Now I have a couple fun activities for you to consider. We're talking about dividing things up. So what I have is a packet of M&Ms. And this is not like the Christmas or the holiday where there's only a couple different colors. This is a regular package of M&Ms that are all different colors. So we have brown ones, we have orange M&Ms, we have yellow ones, we have blue ones, we have red ones, we have green ones. So what you can do with M&Ms is pick a color, any color. So I'm going to pick the blue ones. So I'm going to pull out all of the blue ones and put them into one pile. And then separate out the yellow ones. And then the red ones. Get all the red ones into a pile. And you do that with all the other colors, the brown ones and the orange ones and the green ones. And so now they're all separated out. Now we don't have 11 of those, but we do have different colors. And so, like in our story where we had one kingdom or one tribe, so we can say maybe the blue ones, that they are the kingdom of Judah. Then all the rest of them, they go together, and that makes the kingdom of Israel. And then the fun thing is you get to eat them afterwards. And you can eat them one kingdom or one tribe at a time. Eat them however you like to eat M&Ms. The next activity that goes with the story that you might want to consider is taking a deck of cards. And inside a deck of cards, there are jacks, kings, queens, aces. What I want you to do is I want you to find a black king and one of the red kings. This happens to be the king of clubs, and I want to take the other kings out. And we will, then here is a red king. So now we have the king of clubs and the king of diamonds. And let's find and get that other king out of here. And in a deck of cards, you have cards that are called face cards. They have faces on them. And you have cards that have numbers on them. Well, what you do is you shuffle up the cards really, really good. And so you say that maybe the black king is the king of Judah, and maybe the red king is the king of Israel. And so you turn up a card, and if it's a number card, this happens to be the 6 of diamonds, then you would put that in the pile over on the side of the red king or the king of Israel. And so you would continue to do that. Then if you come up with a face card, then you put that into the pile of the black king or the king of Judah. And you just continue on. So there's a number card, goes to Israel. A face card goes with Judah. A number card with Israel. Another number card goes with Israel. And then a face card goes with Judah. And so you just continue all through the deck. And then you count how many go to one king and how many cards go to the other king. So that's kind of a fun game, and you can do that as many times as you like. So that is the story of King Ahijah and the message that he gave to Jeroboam about how he was going to become the king of northern Israel, and that Solomon and his offspring would remain and rule kings and rule over Judah. And there are the crafts that you might consider. So I hope you enjoyed this story, and I hope you try out some of these crafts and activities. And I just wish you farewell, and I invite you back again when we will study another prophet of God, another messenger of God. God's peace, and have a good day.